Now, there are many ways in which you can set up a role. So I thought we'd just have a look at some of the ways, because each way you set it up provides the children with a different learning experience, you see, and they make different negotiations, which means they shift their language.
Right.
Now, I'm going to look at this God now, seen as a portrait. So I've asked Derek if he'll stand with his back to the wall. It's terribly important if you set something up as a portrait, someone I should say, children can't walk around the back of them because they immediately then destroy for themselves the whole thing. Now you consider all the paintings you've ever heard of or seen in the world and look at the gifts a portrait example will give you. You see, behind him, should the children choose to use him as a portrait in the wind pavilion, we can place information about him. You think of all the paintings you've seen of people, but in the background, how much information. So we can get the sense of the Greek island in a portrait very swiftly. We can see something of his origins. We can even place Poseidon, the god, in a small cutout as the father of this large son who is at once his slave. So you see, there's all this evidence of possibility by setting him up as a portrait. Now, for the children to activate a portrait, they can only learn from Iolaus what he has been painted in about. If he has been painted to have such a face, this is what he knows of his face. The portrait cannot change his appearance because the artist gave it to him. So you must not discuss him as if he can be 1 minute floating about, you know, like a pale wraith. The painter didn't give him that capacity. The painter, however, can foreshadow the future of him by what they put in the background. He could actually see his own demise. The painter could have, a modern painter could have painted him and put the Beaufort scale in at this side. Now, what frame of reference would we create then for children to come and look at a portrait of Aeolus? Now, can you see a teaching use of a portrait?
We're talking about using the portrait as a role, in a sense, for them.
And they can waken the role. They can ask the role to step from the portrait. But when he steps from the portrait, he only knows what he can have in the picture. See, as a portrait, you could have up here all the vocabulary of the winds. And you could have the Beaufort scale, and you could have modern wind measurements. I can't remember what they're called, the things with the little cups on there. That Aeolus knows about this.
Because they're in the portrait.
Yes. He doesn't understand how it works, but he does know that now there are 2 kinds of knowing about the winds, because it's in his portrait. If you consider Robin Hood for a moment, a portrait of Robin Hood can show 2 things. It can show the family he came from and the golden arrow, but it can show a tree with the leaves of his friends named on it. His back, you know, what happened to him before, and now where he dwells. He can actually hold them in his hands, the castle and the trees. Both homes. You can't do that except in the portrait, because the convention allows it. So in awakening the god of the winds from a portrait, you're going to need a different kind of formulation of language. Right. You can't say, "Hoi, come on out," you know. he has to step forth almost. They can teach him to see what is painted behind him. They can teach him to understand that's there.
Right.
Whereas if he hasn't got it there, they have to explain, oh, we do the Beaufort scale now, we don't worry about what you thought you did.
So he
That's
might
all
not,
words.
in the portrait the things would appear, but the children would make the connections between the things.
If that's the purpose you want for this encounter, you want the children to begin to recognise these are only two versions of the same energy. This is the energy that God made. This is the energy that is made by a different idea. We have a different idea of it,
Yes.
but it's still energy. So the sort of use of a portrait here would be, we can start understanding it's all energy. It's gradations of energy. Now, I can accept that you might be very bewildered at this stage, so let's go forward a bit and look at some others, and then we can begin to differentiate when it's best to use a portrait.
Yes, I think that's what I'd like.
When you want to get at origins, a portrait is very useful. You can get the Greek sense of mythology in a portrait, filled out more. You see, you can have a Temple of the Winds painted behind him. Now, in the Wind Pavilion, it may well be they create the portrait of Aeolus because that teaches you how much they understand now. And behind there is this great collage of mythologies
Yes.
which they themselves can create because they don't need a roll now. He can be cut out paper, life-size.
Would the use of the role as a portrait would stimulate them into how they might make use of him to demonstrate to other people?
That's right, yes. They may use the portrait to teach him and themselves, of course, to teach him all his background that he's never seen. Aeolus will not have seen a painted image, perhaps. He may have seen a statue. But he won't have seen perspective. Now, that sort of collage, I am not a painter. I find it very difficult. But I can make collage. Things can be cut out. And they can be rearranged. They can be ordered time-wise, or they can be made to contrast and counterpoint. That seems to me a wonderful way in which the children may learn to put things together in parallel and still distinguish.
So the portrait, Aeolus, would just be the focal point for linking a lot of other things together.
That's right, that's right. We don't, if we know nothing about Aeolus, we don't really need a portrait first, because we need the encounter to get the sense of the power. The second time we meet him, it might be quite useful as a portrait, because there's all the background. Now, if you happen to have colleagues in high schools who have students who are looking at mythology, and I don't know if you would know anybody, but you can ask, you may well find you've got some students who could help make that collage and come in with your class.
Yes.
We don't do enough of this, and I know it takes organisation, and I know it's very difficult. But it's a point where I think we could get much more together on supporting one another, because you give the high school students a purpose in what they're doing. Now let's have a look at Aeolus as if he were carved in effigy. Could you lie down, Derek? Let's give you something. There's a cloth there, and you can make a pillow for his head just to give him a bit of comfort. There's a dark green cloth he can just lie on. Try your head there, and just. We only need to you know, just... Again, we're looking at the notion of integrity and internal coherence. Now you just bundle all that lot up and make him a bit of a pillow. It's very hard to lie down a long time on a...
head
Let's put his head over there. Put my coat and cardigan to just fill it out a bit. Now I'm not suggesting necessarily that the green is right, but it's what we have to do. So, do you need a bit of help to lie down?
If you can hold that
yes,
first
that's
for me.
right. Now, in a sense, if we just arrange you as if you're carved a bit, that's right. Aeolus with boots. You lie down and we'll organise you. Yes, you can trust us to organise you. Carve them. Because, you see, you have to particularly protect people when they're lying down. And I think we'll place the mask there. Are you comfortable enough to just stay while we talk? Now, somebody made this. So this figure can have things written round it, carved on the stone.
Yes.
This Aeolus can only speak what is carved into the stone. So I would compose, or get them to compose, if they were putting him in the wind pavilion, what could quickly be learned about Aeolus by what we letter round him. Now there are two ways you can do it. One is you can say, we understand about Aeolus now, but we want to use an effigy of him in the wind tunnel, in the wind pavilion. So that when people come in, now it sounds like I'm doing all the inventing. I'm not. We just haven't got any children to pose issues with.
Yes.
If the first thing people meet when they come in is this amazing, huge effigy with text, imagine what that text can tell us. And as we move through the pavilion, we may gradually move from the power of Aeolus slowly to the power of the modern radio person who at 5 to 6 every morning gives us the weather forecast. But at the same time, we might see him in portrait with Aeolus behind him. You see, what happens is you expand your own imagination and your own capacity to move the world round, to make different kinds of statements. Now, if we take the sort of simple statement of what and who is Aeolus, what can he do, and what sort of portentous tone can we put round, you can prepare it in advance if you want the children to penetrate it and decipher what it means. Or it's an exercise once they've met him and learned the facts of him, remember, they can compose what is carved upon him, you see. And they could even make it so that when people come in, if they press a tape recorder button, the God will speak. And if some children are sitting there in the wind pavilion, and they are dressed in whatever they think they could be dressed in, son of Aeolus, you know, Mark II, Jaws, you know, the sort of thing, but they could actually interpret to people who come in, who's this, what's he about? You can play this, and they begin to be demonstrators, you see. But it began with meeting the God. Now they are saying, I know, I know, I know.
And
I can use what I know. Now, what this allows you to do, because it is portentous, and he needs protecting with long robes, usually the effigy does need a sort of submersion of personal shape. It's quite useful, is that? It's a protection. And people don't tread on it so near, you see. You can spread him out more and give him a bit more territory.
Because they would
and the words can be written further out. That's part of protection. He can't protect himself, as you know. That mask must never be picked up or touched. And you may have to set that as a contract. This gentleman is lending his time to present this for us to consider. Now you see, that which is carved, you can make him godlike by the names you place round him. Iolaus, supposed son of Poseidon. Don't start saying they'll never be able to read it. They will read it. And then it's the business of, well, who are they at this point? Why are they coming in to meet this effigy? What is the purpose they want to get out of it? You are not saying, I am a magician, I produce these amazing things, come and do this. What you're saying is, for this, I want them to discuss the whole business of language and how we could present this idea to some other people. Because always at the end of your work is the presentation.
So this is further down the line from meeting the God and talking with the God. Yes. You're into much more into what we're going to do.
I would say you're into this third level possibly. However, they could work at the first level provided they are prepared to tackle the writing and awaken the God to help them understand it. So, supposed son of Poseidon, you better make a note of things we'll need to find out. Now, of course, he can only know, and this really limits, not limits, but disciplines the role. The role is not free. I mean, I think you know enough about that.
I've learnt that one, yes.
When he wakes, he can't really sit up, because, you know, it looks like the tomb is wakening up, sort of thing. We're into Stanley Spencer, you know, and everybody climbing out of the graves. What he can do, however, is give a signal by putting his mask upon his face, that he has moved and will speak. I am here, the stone may speak. Iolaus, let's just see what voice Derek finds. Iolaus, will you wake so that we may speak with you? Now let's see what he does. Now you see, he's got to time this. If he's too slow, they'll get bored. If he's too scary, they'll giggle. It's quite delicate. Only he will know by listening carefully. He hasn't been asleep all this time you've been bringing the kids in. He's been hearing what he can do most usefully. Now, you can help him not to get them laughing. Now, can you hear yourself helping them understand something of what he's trying to do? Now, the sort of instinct I might have is, it's almost like the stone breathing. Iolaus, do you hear us?
I am here.
Just wondering what it was what was it, that first question we wanted to ask? Oh yes, it was that, I'm inventing a class.
Yes.
Now you try that business if we want to know why supposed son has been carved in. If that's a question the children were interested in.
Iolaus,
I am here.
why have they carved supposed son of Poseidon?
There was much trouble in my family.
Now you don't need to say any more. That resonates. Do you hear it? Trouble in the family. May we speak together, Iolaus, for a moment? You need the convention, because Derek has to know what's going on. He can't open his eyes and see.
Yeah.
That's another protection. And he's got to hear you saying, come over here a minute.
Yeah.
He's got to hear this kind of thing.
Right.
There's so many uses, you know, so many kinds of protection. And it's who's going to fall over him. Where do I bring him to so that none of them fall over him? Because if they fall over him, you've destroyed something before it was made. And people think, well, it doesn't much matter. It actually does. It does matter. This attention to detail, if you can avoid it. Because the child is embarrassed, Derek may be hurt.
Yes.
And so on. And then it's the matter of trouble in the family. I didn't quite. And then you're in their hands. Whatever will they bring? Now here we are using it to decipher his life from what you've written on it. If we've met him and learned a lot about his life from talking with him, then we are doing a different thing. We're saying, if we made him into an effigy carved, how could we translate that which we heard and took some notes about now into the sort of short, compacted statement people put on stone? Here lies one who thought he was empowered to control the winds. I'm not saying that's what the children will choose, but you're taking them on this journey towards high language, which they won't meet in today's newspapers. The headlines are not high language. Where do you want them to meet high language? How can you help them meet high language? Do you think it matters that they meet high language? Well, it makes your choice. Now let's try him in another way. Thank you, Derek. You may rise, and let's have another look. Now then, if we make him sculptured as a statue, we can, if we choose, create a very modern sculpture of Iolaus. What we can't do is strip him down like Eros. It's too big a shock for small children to meet a naked body. Now, I have used an almost naked body with severely handicapped grown-up people. They have met gods like that because they are not plussed by such problems. But small children could be. However, how might we meet Iolaus so that the children would recognise that God's upset about something? Somebody's carved him that says, we don't need you, we've got modern weather forecasting. Now you just think about how you can create a destroyed Iolaus who has lost his worth, his self-worth. So this encounter will be, but we do need you. We do need myth. The world needs myth. Now that is very high order stuff.
Yes.
You're right up here. Right, you make him. Derek will be as clay in your hands. That's all right.
I think he needs to have less of a... He needs to shrink a bit.
Shrink yourself, Derek.
Yes. And...
Remember, you have to
not
stand
too
a
much.
long time.
Yeah, but with an upturned face, perhaps.
Now, do you know where you're getting this from? You're getting this from all the deep understanding of living you've had, and so can the kids do.
Yes. Would the kids do this?
Well, they may do, but in this case we're doing it for them.
Yes, I mean they could do it.
Yes, because what they're going to do is convince this myth God that he does have value today.
Yes.
He can have self-worth, even though we've got these little instruments and the Beaufort scale. Right.
And perhaps we'll have that more like that. You know, something just losing.
Yes. Yes. Don't look at me, mate.
I'm
That's right, you're just glancing
I'm
by
just,
walking. That's right, yes.
something like that, which is that I can appeal to. I can say, you know, you don't need to, because there's more defence. He's more defenceless.
That's
that.
right. And of course, you've downturned.
Yes.
You're actually following a very classic understanding that our bodies know, that dancers know, you know, that you must go closer to the earth in terms of actually what you're doing, though I don't want to go into a long lecture about this at the moment. He is using bound flow. Whenever you go into the negative aspects of humanity, in this case God, the bound flow keeps the energy in. And the instinct, you see, is to go inwards.
Yes.
The mask is going in. Look how his hands are going in. Now, the problem is you can't get him to stand like that 2 hours.
No.
It's too difficult. So you now have to find a comfort level for him. He doesn't have to go through any pain barriers. Now,
So can I get him down on his
can
knees,
do what
perhaps?
you
Would
like
that
with
be
him.
more
He's your
comfortable?
God.
Can you get into that position and a comfortable?
And he can guide you as to what he can cope with.
Could you take a series of quick instamatic photographs of this, of a difficult position, so that the kids can look at
You
it?
could if you wanted. But in this case, it's simpler than that at this point.
At this point, yes,
Yes.
yes.
But if they wanted to put that in the wind chamber, the wind pavilion, to show through the ages how these gods become neglected, statues become broken, we forget they were painted, we don't want to know, they don't look like you'd have them in your living room, who needs them, they're only old stones. It is we as we walk through the world that give life to the objects we find. And that is an important thing you can help children understand, of course, if you want to. So set him up where you feel he's comfortable.
Yes, I mean, it might be more comfortable for you to even lean back a bit, is it, Derek, on your legs?
Or you
so
could
that-
even give him a chair to lean back on.
Yeah, something like...
You've got to give him some feedback as to how
Yeah, I'm okay.
you could hold it.
Yes,
You
leaning
could
back
hold
on.
I mean,
it, yes.
the thing
Yes.
about this that's appealing now is that for children, they will almost be above him.
That's right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's very sensitive of you.
Um,
Very sensitive.
and
Also,
maybe you...
that I was going to say, the tenderness of children, once the vocabulary of tenderness is reawakened, because it's always there, it needs reawakening, they can raise him. I've seen children do some amazing things.
Yes.
Once they feel they can touch him, and don't forget what a big barrier that is for them. Just let him lean on a chair a little bit, just for now. And we'll look at the frame of reference. In this case, the people understand a lot about myth. They've done a fair amount of study. There's no point in meeting the god of the winds looking like that, you know, if he's got a bad stomach or whatever, to reduce it all. This is a high skill, to take big things and reduce them, to be flippant with them and go straight back. It's a very good skill to have. To see, oh, well, it's only such and such, you know. It's only his rheumatism, you know. Made too many storms, he's got wet too long, that sort of thing. Now then, we are meeting him, and we know we are meeting an Iolus who we have to decide is worthy to have self-worth again. And he cannot gain it until we convince him. So you see, your negotiations here are, my instinct would be to keep them a long way off him at first, so they have time to look at him. Now, you've got a problem because his eyes are not covered, so he has to have a way of seeing unseeing. He must never catch the eyes of people, and they must never feel that he did. Even if they glance right in, the eyes are not seeing back, because that's a protection for him. You see, if he sees them and they see him, they may be destroyed. They can't deal with it.
Yes.
And so we are coming specifically armed with reassurances
Yes.
that the world needs you. Now, one of the reassurances we can bring is modern filmmakers are capable now of making the winds like you used to do. It's modern technology that makes it possible to do what you did.
Yes.
So they may well at this point, so that we can say, well, now who could we be that would even be bothered? You know, we've got to have a reason for convincing him that we need you. The world needs you, and we want to show how you did things. So there's another frame of reference. Never get the notion that there's one frame of reference. Another frame of reference could be representatives of Poseidon who are beginning to see he could have been wrong to see his son as a slave because he was jealous. Now that's family trouble. So they are, in fact, almost counsellors to Iolaus. Can you forgive your father? Now I'm going a bit far out because it's not to do with wind and science at this point. But the role is never a fixed
Right.
thing.
Yes, I'm saying
it's always fluid. Just as all the world of literature is constantly fluid. All human experience is moving and flowing, you see. Now let's try some more. Let me just see if I have any more on this. Oh yes. I can't forget this one. If we want to see a movie of Iolaus, thank you Derek, Raising the Wind, you see, one of the things the children are empowered to do in a movie is say, we understand something about you by what you've just done. So if I say, this person is a puzzle to me, I don't quite know what's up on here, but they seem to think it would explain something to people at the garden festival. So we might see a short clip. I'll just switch on the projector and you need, you know, that sort of convention. And the picture will come up any minute. Now up comes the picture of Iolaus, which we'll talk about in 1 second. So Iolaus may be seen talking to his father and putting the winds in a cave. He can be seen receiving the bags of winds, and for that he would need some sort of shapes. And obeying his father, you may not refer to him as father if you didn't want to, and placing them in the cave. And his father, we can only hear what he says. We can't hear what his father says, but we can tell what his father said by what he said. Now that short clip, as you might say, I say, well that's supposed to be what he did. He looked after the wind. And I don't know if there's anything you'd like to discuss with him. But of course we can only do it by, I could maybe find a bit more film if there's any you'd like to know. And they'll teach me the bit of film they want. I can't predict. They might say, can he explain, we want a little bit in the film that explains who his dad is. Now that's where Derek has to think sharp. So you can't wish this one on an 18-year-old that's just come in for 5 minutes while he has a free lesson from the upper school or whatever, you see.
Yeah.
So supposing we said, can we see the bit where the winds got put in the bag? Now in my experience, when you work with role, with juniors, and they know about a movie one, they find they learn more from the movie because they're used to movies. It's amazing what skill they have in interpreting the movie, you see. And so you want to see the little bit where in fact Poseidon made him pack the winds in the bags. All right, I'll see if I can find it. I'll just run it back. Just put him where you want him to be in the film then, before it starts. And I'll run and I'm giving instructions. I'll run the part where Iolaus hears his father, repeats the message, and summons the winds. Is that what you wanted? I'm saying it twice so that Derek has done it, you see. Right, I'll just turn it back then. I think the picture's coming up now. Now he's doing his best. He's only got one hand.
No, sorry.
No. Well, you can't do it straight off. I mean, you'd have thought about it a bit. Now, if there's anything you don't understand about it, I can stop it, you know, and we can make him do it again. You can do that with film.
You can go back.
I'll run it back, and so on. Now, we can stop it there because you're struggling on there, Derek. Now, he'll need to speak at some point, but the amount of talk he does will depend on what these children sound like they need, and we haven't got them. So at the moment, it's all empty.
Yes.
He can't be filled, you see, by the quality of the watching or the suggestions the children are making. Now, at this point, Derek can't see too well either. So I might find myself, if I thought, they're not going to quite get that, it's a bit tricky, it's vague by the nature of what he has to do. So I might say, I'll tell you what, we'll say what we think he's doing in the film, and that will give Derek a sense of where they're at in their thinking, you see. Now, it's obviously getting more complex in some ways, but sometimes a movie will explain very fast something. Thank you, Derek. Rest it there. Now we're going to set you up. Yes?
I'm just going to say the other thing about it is that presumably it gives you the ability to wind back to an earlier part of the movie that explains something.
Yes, 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 yes. You see, they might say, well, how was Iolaus born? I'll say, well, I don't know if I've got that, but I'll take it back as far as I can. And obviously, if you do use this sort of thing, you and he have, or she, I mean, or she and he, you know, have to be certain of the sorts of things that are truthful to the mythology. You know, you can't say he was born like Pallas Athena, because he wasn't. I don't know how he was born, because I've not done my homework. But he wasn't just, you know, born out of a headache, as far as we know, if Zeus had a headache for Iolaus and so on. So you can't put in what I'd call fake mythology. It's too important, you see. Now let's make you into some roles, and we'll use Derek as our artist again, so that we can see a few more. I'll let you, can you draw with your big sleeve? Right. Let's try this one. We want to use a role as a clipper master, so you just become a body for a minute.
Right.
And Derek will draw you. But just think of, in your project here, what aspect could be understood or really their knowledge used if we had a clipper master constantly moving, like in The Last Grain Race or Cook, but it's trade really.
Yes, it's trade.
So we're going to invent a clipper master role and a purpose for having him there.
Well, it was the trade routes, wasn't it? It was. It would have been using the winds to get speedily to the east.
Yes. It seems to me that what the clipper master brings, the ships under sail, so on, and the doldrums and so on, that particular role, Derek, I see as introducing the children to a very close look at the map of the world, to get this sense of the globeness of the world. Because you will have a concept about it based upon getting from here to there, using these charts, and doing it with an understanding of how not to get stuck in the doldrums, you see. So we have to clothe him so that he states his century. Now, I don't know when the last grain race was, the last clipper ships. I mean, they still sail now, don't they? The modern clippers on parade, as you might say, the tall ships. But we want to put you in the height of the time. Now, you see, you and the children would obviously have found out something and need now to know more about just when the height of the clipper trade was, and at this very moment I don't know. You may have a date in your mind, do you?
It would be a guess. I wouldn't
Well,
know.
say it, if you think, you know.
Would it be, I don't know, mid-19th century?
It could be, tea or whatever.
Yeah.
Right, mid-19th century sailor, but clipper master. So think about the authority trappings that you may have. I am not a barefooted sailor swabbing the decks. I'm a clipper master. And, you know, at the moment we can't dress you because we didn't know we were going to use that in that sense. But what might we have that we can use that sets a role very swiftly? You drawing us a clipper master there? Right, what are you giving us? Is it a jerkin?
A jerkin, because he needs to be active. He doesn't want constricting sleeves.
Yes.
So I think it'd be a linen shirt underneath, fairly, which means it might be it might look slightly earlier than mid-19th century.
Yes. Now you have to say, this is what I have to say anyway, have I got anything that would do? And it might well be, and this sounds a bit silly, you may have a brown pillowcase. If you've only got a brown pillowcase and you can't cut a brown pillowcase up, you're a portrait. Because you ain't got no back. Does that make sense? I always use what I have.
Yes.
I don't go hiring fancy costumes and I spend no money. So you can look, you start to see your
Yes, and you'd have
wardrobe in a
more,
totally
and in
different
terms
way.
of that sort of person would not be constrained by space. You know, you have a sense of them have a lot of space around them.
Yes, that's nice. Yes, the horizon,
Yes.
but them sails. That sort of role would need the sense of the wind all the time.
He's going to have his sea legs.
And his sea legs.
Which would be...
He'd already,
That's right.
yes,
it's
that's
like-
right.
Yes.
That's right.
Everything
that's right.
is.
It's
I know, he's just expansive.
Yes.
Yes. You've already developed that sense yourself.
Yes.
Yes. Now then we can think of, while Derek continues a bit with a bit more detail, because we might be able to just say, oh, now that's the one object that we need. Now, what sort of sailing ship tool does the guy need to have with him? Is it a sextant? Is it a telescope? A spyglass, I really mean in these terms. And you do your best. Now, I go to art when I want this kind of information. I think, where can I find it? Can I find any in biography or autobiography even? What about Cook? Did he ever, you know, this kind of thing? You grope about with the knowledge you have to get you started. And you would probably not need anything on your head. You don't go in for stocking caps and things like that. The least, the minimal.
It's like the car keys, isn't it?
It is. It's like the car keys, yes. So you might even find that as long as the roll were dressed in the same colour all the way up and had the tool. Now, if the roll is a portrait, he can have paper tools. He can have a table with his rutters, his charts, his spyglass, his wages bill, his bills of lading on there, but they'll all be paper. They can all be paper because he isn't dressed as a clipper master. He can actually have clipper master, the Endurance. And as long as it's all paper, it's internally coherent. What you don't want is a real brass spyglass and clipper master written across you. Does that make sense to you? Now this is called, in my view, I call this internal coherence, and all artists use it. Many modern artists are mixing things very much because modern materials enable them to do it. That you can get Hockney using photocopiers in exciting ways. And he's always, artists are pushing back the barriers of what can be done, you see. They don't just have to rely on paint and canvas now. So this is constantly moving. The nature of internal coherence is constantly moving. That he might actually, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this, but he might actually have an oil painting put on a photocopy so that, you know, the two pigments are together. But for the children in this sort of work, my feeling is if you go too far out, they get confused. And so, are we getting any nearer to a clipper master here? Yes, 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 yes.
Sorry, can you see?
So he's in leathern shoes.
Yeah.
So your ordinary shoes without laces, if you've a pair without laces, they would do.
Yes.
If you were in brown, possibly.
Yes.
If you'd got a short-sleeved sort of jerkin,
Yes.
it would do.
Yeah.
And you'd leave your shirt collar under, if it were possible. Or wear a white one and pull it well out, you see.
Yes.
And again now, who might the children, what frame of mind might the children be in coming to discuss with a clipper master? Now you see, one of the bits of excitement, you know, I said in an earlier tutorial, we are not creating the circumstances where it's all deadly serious and they're going to turn out to be nice little workers for Mrs. Thatcher. We're not talking like that. We're saying I could give them a bit of excitement. We'll sail with Cook for half a day. We'll understand trade winds. We'll get aboard and be made to go up the rigging. So you see, we come to try and get a job. There's a man with a ship and no crew.
Yes.
But it's about trade winds and journeys. And we've deliberately landed ourselves with this journey that we're going to be in the power of this clipper master who will bid us do things. And all the time the convention will be, we can say, stop the ship. I've learned something else about trade winds. A kid needs a notebook in a back pocket and a pencil. Hang on. And the negotiator can say, you know, if there's anything you realise that you didn't know before, and then you can be saying, when we met him, I wonder if it would be worthwhile taking people in the pavilion through such an experience to realise what happens to sailors in the doldrums with grain fermenting. How do they live? What ships tack in the doldrums? Does that make sense to you? I feel I'm just hammering.
It's another possibility, isn't it? I mean, that's what you're saying.
Exactly. It's a direct way of going aboard. So we're not always saying, oh, roll is what you stand up there and they come and ask it questions. That's a wonderful example of children being able to enter into a day in the life of, as you might say. But they never forget they're there to learn something, to know they know it, and then use what they know. The more I look at this, the more I think you have a perfect coil. Does that make sense to you? Do you feel you have?
I've got almost too much, really.
Well, of course you have too much, but you'd have too much for a project there. I mean, there'd be going up in the upper school before you got thoroughly into that. But this way you get connections. Because the trade wind skipper can say, some sailors think it's Iolaus back again. You know, and you've made this bridge. Let's try another one. Let's try a very modern one, Ian and Derek. If we are dealing with the pollution in the forests, let's meet a forester. Because I live in Northumberland or Tyneside, I tend to think of Kielder. You may think of something else because of where you live. Let's make a forester. Now you look at your chart. What could they learn best by meeting a forester? And of course they may go out with him into the forest, but first they want to meet him. Now I just brought, because I was interested in this one, because I like the notion of modern roles, you see. All I've got at the moment are these two. So, under what circumstances might a forester come into school to meet us and share something of what he knows? But we're going to meet him first as a role. It's not a real forester yet. You see, if you bring in a real forester the first time, they know too much. And they can't resist being enthusiastic. And they shove everything they know at the kids. But a role doesn't. A role is restrained productively, so that when you do meet a real forester, it doesn't overwhelm the kids. You know, it's like meeting real architects. They will natter on about digs and so on. So now, how shall we make a forester?
So we've got somebody modern day who maybe knows about trees and pollution and...
We have to indicate that he goes out. So we need almost the cliche of a man who's out, you know, a person.
Yes.
I mean, a girl would be a very useful role for this, obviously. Because of women do jobs like this.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't have to be male.
I think strong boots are the thing that you start to think of first.
That's right, yes, wellies or whatever, yes, something that stands up to a lot of use.
Yes.
Yes, yes, and some sort of wind cheater or...
Yes.
You've got an anorak. Didn't I see you in an anorak?
I've got a
you know, that
weather
sort
coat.
of a weather coat.
Yes.
Yes, yes. Now you see, because it's a role, you might have this with you. I mean, a real forester wouldn't go around with a lump of wood. He doesn't need it. He's got enough wood in his head, as you might say. But you might just have it. You might even have bits of wood in your pocket. You may have a twig in your hand with some sort of pollution. Somebody was talking about sycamore trees and the black pollution they get on them. You see, you may have a couple of twigs like that gives us some clues. We're into sign again. Now let's think of the framing, what they would learn in terms of your projects that they can use in their pavilion from meeting a forester. Now, what do you think? You see, at level 1, we can find out what foresters do.
Yes.
So we can get to know, and you're in a hurry, and you've got a modern watch, and, you know, you've got the Land Rover outside, and you're going up to Kielder, and you've got your map. And they can get a lot of information of where the forests are in England, without a teacher saying, now look at all the forests of Britain. And then, you see, at the second level, can we actually... listen to you talking in your head as you write your report after a day, and we'll translate it into a sound tape of a day in the forest by a forester. I'm just using the old chart for Iolus. I'm not saying it's the best one for this. And so it gets, you know, if the local council is going to cut the foresters out, then they may take you along with them to, might be the head teacher, to explain to the city council, listen, this guy is very important because...
Yes.
Does that make a bit of sense? I feel I'm rushing you, I'm rushing you through. I thought of a few, you see. We've done enough anyway to see what I mean. Any role can serve your purpose.
Yes.
But how it serves its purpose, your purpose, is different according to how the children will do the learning on the role. Now finally, you see, you can see what you'll have to understand and apply. Your responsibilities as teacher to engage and frame the class, so you only bring in a role when you see a need for it, devise the programme and its purpose, service the class encounter with the role, enable the class to be responsible for their learning, and ensure that you get to the curriculum zone you want. The responsibilities of the role are to sustain it, to listen to you, keep to the domain you've built in, keep the class in power and responsibility, not take it from them, and finally, listen to you.
Mm.
You are the guide to the role.
Mm. Mm.
Once again, it sounds a lot when you say it, but as you get onto it, it starts to belong.
Yeah.
You know, at the moment, I'm shoving it at you, you make it your own.
Yes.
And remember, you are safe, because you only decide to say, I wonder if I could try a role here, when you think they're ready to get the best use out of the role.
Mm.
You never need to introduce one if you don't feel ready. But you've travelled from, I've changed my language to empower the children to be colleagues, right through to a world comes in. I've introduced into this school building other worlds.
Mm.
And that's what it's about.
Mm. Yes.
Now, the next thing we have to do is bind this firmly into the levels of the curriculum. Because we're living in a world where that at the moment seems to be mattering.
Absolutely. Yes. And that's a big problem in terms of meeting the demands that are there.
Yes.
But it's very exciting to see how it can develop into something that the children will really engage with.
It's people like you that will prove it. It's not people like me. It's classroom teachers in the classroom that will prove it. Nobody else can do it.
No. No.
Right. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
We've now got a forest.
Nearly.
Thank you very much.